Today's daf yomi is Bava Basra 167. Bava Basra Kuf Samach Zayin. We're going to start on the bottom of Kuf Samach Vav Amud Beis, 5 lines from the bottom. Daf yomi is dedicated to a shmir for the Chayalim, Matzal for the Shuyim, Yeshua for Am Yisrael on this Eis Tzara. Gemara tells us on the bottom of 166b, discussing ambiguities in contracts. Ahuda have a kasav a shis meya v'zuzeh. There was a contract which wrote 601 zuz. So they don't know what it meant. What does the 600 mean? The Shulchan Rav Sharvia Kamai de Abaye Shismeya Istri v'zuzeh. No, Abaye sent. So Rav Sharvia sent a message in front of Abaye. Is it 600 istri and a zuz? Udoma shismeya prite v'zuzeh. Now prite, is it 600 istri and a zuz or 600 prite and a zuz? Prite is certainly much smaller than a zuz, like a copper, not a copper, but like almost like a penny. But the istri, some have it as Rashbam has it 4 times a zuz, or sometimes has it half a zuz. There's a dispute as to what it's worth. But anyway, he says, how do we determine how much it's worth? So Amalei dal prite. Says, well, you could for sure rule out prite because that would not be written in the contract. That's suchi kamasaki lahu, because basically prite is a smaller denomination. So instead of writing as 192 prutos, they would write a dinar. So they wouldn't have written it as 600 prutos because it's like writing 200 pennies. You just write $2. Umashvilahu zuze, and they would. And so therefore, you just count, and you would count the pritos as a zuz. And so therefore, my amra. So what do you want to say? Shismei istri v'zuz. You want to say it's 600 istri and a zuz, or shismei zuze v'chad zuze, or you want to say it could be. There's girsa issues here, but anyway, so it's not clear how you rule it. But it says yad bal ashtar al taftona. But the person in the contract has the lower hand because all you could do is motzi mechaver all of araya. The burden of proof rests upon the one who wants to get it. We're not going to assume it's the prutos because that's just never happens. And a person writes prutos in the contract, but it's also not the larger amount. And so therefore, Rabbeinu Hananel says you only get istri and not zuze, and each istira is half a zuz. But Rashbam says no, he gets zuze because istri is 4 times the zuz. And so therefore, Rashbam says he gets zuzi and not istri. Amar Abaye, Haiman Debai, Mamechve Chasimos Yadeh Bebeidina. A person who has to show their signature in the court, they need to verify their signature in the court. Why do they have to do this? Well, the Gemara gave us an example in Ksubos Chafal. Let's say a person's signature and another witness were on a contract, and the other witness died. So now we need one who was still alive to verify the other person's signature, and now his own signature needs to be verified by comparing it to the text that was written. Otherwise, he's supporting 3/4 of the document with his testimony. So therefore, Abai says, you shouldn't write your signature on the bottom of the page because Dilma Mishkacha Acher because maybe somebody else will find a blank piece of paper with your name on the bottom and they'll fill in the top. It's like a blank check with a signed blank check. And we have a concept that if he takes out a piece of paper with his signature on it that he owes money, you can't collect from the lukuchos, you can't collect from the property with a lien on it, but you can't collect it from the free and clear property. And so therefore, there's an issue here. So you don't want to do that. So what should you do? You should only sign it at the top. And the Gemara tells us a story. Ahuba Zabina, there was a person who was a tax collector, and now there was a special dispensation for the Tzur B'mei Rabbanim, for the young Torah scholars. They had tax exemptions, like they have in America. They have tax exemptions, parsonage, etc. But they had to have a letter from Abaye. But this tax collector said, let me have your signature so I can prove it's a good letter when they come before me. He said, show me your signature. So when the Rabbanan come before me, I'll show it to them without taxing them. So he signed. Abai went to sign on the top of the page. But this tax collector, this Jewish tax collector, was trying to push the page, so Abaye was not signing on the top, but towards lower down. Abaye says, "I'm like Kvar Kadmuch Rabbanan. The rabbis already came before you. The rabbis already came before you and warned us about this. It was actually Abaye who warned, but the rabbis warned us not to do this. We see from here that the rabbis already came before us and gave us the direction in life, not just in this case about a contract, but in every case in our life. We could always say this phrase, Kvar Kadmuch Rabbanan, the rabbis already came before us. Amar Abaye mitchilas v'ad eser v'lichtov b'sov shita." Abaye says, don't write from the letter 3 till 10 at the end of a line, because the word tlas is 3, but tlas in, you just add a unit and then, no, and then it becomes 30. Arba is 4, arba in is 40. And so you do all that way till 10, and you could just add a unit and nun, very easy letters to add, very small letters. And then you could change the whole text. So therefore, don't write it at the end of the line, because maybe they'll forge and they'll write it whatever he wants. But let's say it falls out like that. You have no choice. Then you should repeat your words 2 or 3 times, and that way you won't have this problem. So you repeat it in the text of the contract, because it'll happen, it comes in the middle of the line. There was a person who had a contract that said 1/3 in the orchard. 1/3 in the orchard. So basically he says, I'm buying 1/3 in the orchard, and the orchard was in a garden. So the person took the contract. Erased basically the bottom of the base and half of the top, and Vishavya upardisa. And so he turned in, instead of 1/3 in the garden, he said 1/3, instead of 1/3 in the orchard, he said 1/3 and the orchard. So 1/3 of the garden and the orchard. Also coming to Abaye noticed this. He said, my time why does this vav have so much space between the vav and the pei? I'm on to you. So Kafte V'odei, Abaye intimidated him. It's not a question, did he actually beat him, or did he just threaten him? Different approaches amongst the Rishonim, but he got the guy to admit it. He says, I'm buying the portion of Reuben and Shimon who are brothers. But Reuben and Shimon had a brother, his name was Achi. Also Kasav Vav. So the guy wrote, he added in a Vav, buying Reuben, the portion of Reuben, Shimon, and Achi. Vishavya V'achi. So he made it and Achi. Also coming to Abaye, my time in Dachkli Amo, high Vav, Kliyai, Kapti Vodi. Abaye said, look, why is the Vav so forced in there? It's noticeable. And he forced him to admit. There was a contract which Rava and Rava Barada both signed on it. Also coming to Rava. Rava said, he says, yeah, the signature is Didihi. It's my signature, Mio, but I'll tell you a problem. I never would have signed on top of Rava Barada's name. So he forced him to admit it. So now Rava says, he got the guy. He says, tell me your methods. Okay, I understand how you can forge my name. How has a shaky hand. How were you able to do it? He says, he says, I put my hand on like a rope ladder, a rope bridge, and while I was writing it. So basically I put my hand on the rope bridge. And so therefore, I was resting on the rope bridge and I guess writing in the other hand while the bridge was shaking, and that's how I was able to write it. And some say, Kamazarnuka, because he stood on a bucket and wrote it. Now we're talking about which types of, says the Mishnah, which types of documents can you write if only one of the parties is there, but it's the party who's giving everything to the other party. So a get, we know, is something that a man gives to a woman. Biblically speaking, the woman doesn't even need to accept, the woman doesn't have to agree to accept it. It's just rabbinically, we said she does. So biblically speaking, it's just from the man to the woman. So kos and get she write a get for a man, He could write to get that Reuben is divorcing his wife, even though his wife is not with him. And also the woman accepts the ksuba. The ksuba is her bond that she's entitled to. No, you could write the fact that you could write a receipt for the woman that she received the ksuba from this man, even though he hasn't given it to her yet, because it's all on her. If she wants to say, have this receipt, so she has it handy, that's her decision. As long as they know, as long as they recognize that. We'll see what that means in the Gemara. Baal no saying and the husband has to pay for the get, and the woman is going to have to pay for the receipt. Baal no saying So, excuse me, Rashbam corrects what I said. The husband pays for the get, Vislara shover, and he also has to pay for the receipt, for the bond. The skutahu, because that's his benefit that she doesn't go and use it to collect another time. So you have to pay for both the get and the receipt and the bond receipt and the ksuba receipt, and we'll see why. The Gemara says, Kosvin Shovar on top of the Mishnah continues on top of 167a. Excuse me, 167b. Kosvin Shovar Lov Alpha Pisha Emal Imo. So too, you can recite a receipt for the borrower, even though the lender is not with him. Basically, you can recite Kosvin Shtar Lov. You can recite a note for the borrower that the borrower owes the lender money, even though the lender is not with him, because it's just a bonder's obligation. But you don't write the loan that the lender is lending this money unless the borrower is with him, because otherwise the lender will write contracts without the borrower at all, and he'll collect them improperly, obviously. Now, the borrower has to pay for the promissory note. You write a note for the seller, even though the purchaser is not there, because it's obviously to the seller's disadvantage. You don't write that he purchased it unless the seller is with him. This is obviously the case only where he's already received the money. We're talking about a case where the seller has already received the money. And so now, and he has witnesses, because otherwise we have to be concerned. Maybe the purchaser doesn't want to buy it, obviously. And you don't write for the purchaser that he purchased it, unless the seller is with him. The purchaser has to pay for the document. You only write the documents of Erusin. These are betrothal documents having to do with the wedding, the gifts involved, the obligations, and the Nisuin that's understood to be the ksuba, unless both of them agree, all the parties, whether the bride's party and the groom's party. The groom pays for it. You don't pay for contract of harisus. You don't write a contract of harisus and kabuanos. Harisus is a sharecropper. Basically, you get a portion of the crops that the field produces, and kabuanos is you're entitled to a certain amount of money for your work, regardless of how much the field produces. You don't write those documents because since there's two parties involved in the deal, they both have to agree. The one who is the sharecropper or the worker, they have to pay for the contract. You only write contracts of berurin. The Gemara is going to explain that. And Maise Bezdin, this is when the court comes to seize a document, unless both of them agree. Or both of them have to be aware. Both have to pay for it. You write them for both of them. Each one has to get their own contract. What does it say that you write the get only on the condition that the court recognizes the parties? What means is ubavache makir shema ish. Beget. Ubavache makir shema ish beget v'shema isha b'shover. He says, as long as You recognize the name of the man in the get and the name of the woman in the receipt, because otherwise you have to be concerned. And maybe this get is being written for fraudulently for a different woman, and she's claiming that, and he's saying, I'm the husband, and he's just going to give it to her, and she'll claim she's divorced. And also, the same thing with the woman who's requesting the bond, the receipt, that maybe she's just going to give it to a different man, and he'll say, "Oh yeah, I this is a receipt." So therefore, you have to know the people. Yosef Rav Safar Rav Acha Bar Huna Rav Chanina Bar Chanina v'Yosef Bai Gabayel v'Yosef coming Bayo Shema Ish Beged in Shema Isha Lo Shema Isha Beshover in Shema Isha Lo. You only have to know the name of the man in the get, but not the woman. The name of the woman in the receipt, but not the man. But we have a different concern. Dilma Kasav Gita v'Azol Matuela Isisa Dahayach. Maybe Reuben wants to divorce his wife Sarah. What's going to happen is maybe Reuben doesn't want to divorce his wife, but he knows that his friend Sarah wants to get a divorce. So he'll ask the court to write him a gift that he's divorcing Sarah, even though it's not his wife. And he'll give it to the woman Sarah. And also sometimes Azla Kasva Isha Shovar, maybe the woman will write the receipt, and she'll give it to a man that's not her. And so basically it's not her husband. And so basically you should have to know both parties. So yeah, you have to know both of them. Where it says, but still another concern. But maybe there's two people by the same name who live in the same city. But Dilma Ksiv Gita, maybe he'll write a get. And he'll give it to the other woman, and she'll claim she's divorced. And that's why you really have such a case of two people by the same name living in the same city. You have to bring them all together when you do the divorce. When they do the divorce, they all have to come together. So the Gemara says, but how doesn't provide a foolproof solution? Maybe he'll go to another city, and then in that other city, he'll start off with the name. He'll pretend he's by another name. Vikstiv Gito and then he'll get the get, and then he'll give it to this other woman, and she'll say, I have a get, and it was written in this other city. And it's a total forgery. He says, no, once you've been established in the city for 30 days, we don't suspect you anymore. Because the person is not going to live undercover for 30 days and just to do this because he's worried he's going to be discovered. So the Gemara says, so the Gemara asks the question, well, let's say he's not been established in that city for 30 days. What are you supposed to do? We don't know that this is for sure his name. So you call him suddenly and you see how he answers. And so therefore, that's how you try to trick him. No, he says, that's not going to work. The dishonest person will be very careful with his dishonesty, and he won't answer. And so therefore, you can't do anything until he establishes a chazaka. So now the Gemara tells us, there was a receipt where Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba was signed on it. Also, the woman came before him, and she said, she said to him, that wasn't me. So Amar Ananami Amrilu Lav Ihihi. He said, I also said to the witnesses that were signing with me on the receipt that you're not the same woman that signed on the receipt. She's correct. And they responded to me that I made a mistake because her voice changed and I agree with them. And so you accepted your ksuba, meaning to say, I thought it wasn't you, but so there was basically the case is that there was a woman there was a person who came before, and the man, and she wanted her money for ksuba, and the husband says, no, I have the receipt that you accepted it. And Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba was signed on it. And the woman said, that wasn't me. I wasn't this woman who asked you to sign this bond. It's possible that it was a different woman. So Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba responded and said, I also said to the witnesses who signed me on the receipt, this is not the same woman who requested us to write the receipt. And really the truth is, she never received her ksuba. And they said to me, no, she's the same woman. And they said to me, yeah, she just got older and her voice changed, meaning to say, yeah, it is her. Even though the rabbis say that once you give testimony, you can't undo it. A Torah scholar like Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, he doesn't check too closely at women. He doesn't look closely at women. And so therefore, the first testimony, when he said that it was not her, that doesn't mean anything. And so therefore, he's not changing his testimony. And so therefore, we're going to say, under those circumstances, he says that this is if he's going to look closely and see that this is really her, he's going to be believed. So therefore, it's a little tricky how do you read it exactly, but we believe him to go back and change his mind. So are we allowing him to go back and change his mind and say she's not the woman or she is the woman? So there's two different approaches to this. I mean, my initial reading was to say that it's not the woman, but the Rashbam does not read it like me. I'll read the Rashbam. Rashbam says, Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba, he doesn't look at the women so much. And when he first said that it was not her, he wasn't correct. And so therefore, when he says in the end that it's her, but her voice changed, that's not changing his initial testimony, because he's now claiming my initial testimony was that it was not her. And since he said now I look closely, we rely upon him and we believe him. But others say, the Meiri, the Ritva, they say no. At first, he wanted us that he said it was her, and now he's saying it's not her. And Abaye says, even though we say you can't go back on your testimony, nevertheless, that you can. So it's both approaches. There was a specific receipt that Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba was signed upon. So she says that wasn't me. Ibra. So Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba said to her, Ibra antava. It really was you. But that when I signed on it. Even though it's not typically the case of a Torah scholar to look at women, even the duck. If he says that he looked closely, we believe him. Okay, this is today's beautiful daf. And we'll stop here. Yeshikoach.
Thank you.
Yeshikoach.